Thanks for having me, Ron. I appreciate it. And to everyone on the line, sounds like it's been a fun morning so far, or afternoon, depending on where you're at. And there's lots of things to digest related to net zero. And if I could put myself in your shoes for a moment, it still might feel pretty daunting and overwhelming to cost effectively get your organization to net zero, while incorporating all these different things on all the various scopes that you need to make an impact on, scopes 1 through 3. So firstly, thanks for being here. Thanks for being a climate leader and trying to push your organization forward and bring some new things back to your organization. If there's one thing for you to take away from my talk today, it would be this: buying permanent carbon removals today, from bio-oil sequestration or a variety of the other removal technologies that are out there, will help have tremendous benefits for our climate further into the future. And specific to bio-oil sequestration, can have some pretty significant impacts on rural air quality, as well as a just transition for oil and gas workers in the American heartland, as well as preventing wildfires in the American West. Beyond that, by being an early supporter of what Charm is doing, you can actually help decarbonize the steel industry. And if you're surprised about that, I'm going to show you how we can get there. But the two big takeaways that I hope you remember is that this bio-oil that you see on the screen in front of you looks a lot like barbecue sauce, and it can be made from inedible waste plant matter. It's very widely available, and converting it to bio-oil improves economic outcomes and also air quality for these rural and agricultural communities, either forestry communities or ag communities. And at a large enough scale, bio-oil can be used to make metallic iron, which is a key input into steel making. So anytime you use even recycled steel, you have to input new iron to give it its toughness. And by the numbers, if we converted just 23% of all of the excess corn stalks that are produced every year in the United States, because the US is the biggest corn producer on earth, we could eliminate the carbon emissions of all of the new iron, the new metallic iron that are made per year in the United States. And that would be 73 million tons of carbon dioxide removals from the environment. So I can't wait to show you more about Charm and how we plan to get there. All right, Ron used the word offsets earlier, and I want to level set us with what the heck is a carbon removal. So I bet you didn't expect to see a bathtub today on a webinar, but picture the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere like a bathtub. We've filled up that bathtub above the safe level of CO2 in the atmosphere. And so there's a natural carbon cycle that's on the left side of this screen, and that's just happening. Plants are growing, plants are dying, and carbon is cycling in and out of that. I'm going to cover that up for a second to just focus on the human-made emissions. So if we were to turn off the emissions tap from human-made emissions today, by incorporating all the cool technologies, I saw circuit meter earlier and whatnot, we'd still be above the safe level of CO2 in the atmosphere, which means that all the climate impacts, sending best wishes to everyone in Florida today and whatnot, the climate impacts that we're seeing today are going to be better than the climate that we will give our kids and grandkids if nothing is done, even if we stop all emissions today. And so a carbon removal is proactively grabbing a unit of carbon out of the atmosphere. This is in contrast to a carbon offset, which is protecting an existing non-emission from going up into the air. For example, not cutting down a tree or protecting a unit of farmland or something like that. So what Charm Industrial does is engineered carbon removals, really powered by plants' natural ability to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. There have been a number of other climate leaders that have committed to this. I'm so glad Microsoft is on the call today. Maybe that individual can speak to some of the fantastic work Microsoft is doing to pull their historical emissions out of the air. But just between Earth Day and the Davos Summit earlier this year, $1.3 billion was announced to purchasing these permanent removals through 2030. So this is a fantastic shot in the arm to what the world needs to eventually avert the worst impacts of global climate change. And hopefully your organization could be a part of this. with the technology I'll show you today, and again, with other CDR technologies that are out there. And CDR stands for carbon dioxide removal. So here's what Charm does. Like Ron mentioned, we take agricultural residues as well as forestry residues, and we liquefy them into that really thick-looking barbecue sauce. The liquefaction process has a fancy name. It's called pyrolysis. And that white box in the middle represents the machine that we've built in order to turn those dead plants that will soon decompose into a liquid that we can then move around. And for today, we're just injecting that back underground, somewhere between 500 feet and 2,000 feet below the surface, which is far below the traditional water table. The water table for groundwater exists more like 50 to 200 feet below the surface. There's a small byproduct called biochar. Looks a lot like charcoal, and we give that back to farmers, or we can put that back on the forest floor to promote soil health and water retention. But we don't sell any carbon removals based on that biochar. We only sell it based on the bio oil, or that barbecue sauce that we can put back into old oil wells and underground. So about 25% of all of the dollars that we take in to perform the removals today go back to farmers and to oil and gas workers to actually perform the injections at old oil wells. We never work with oil wells that are continuing to extract fossil fuels in order to boost their extraction. We'll never work with that type of setup. So currently, Charm is operating with 3 different parallel pathways. We are operating third-party pyrolyzers that are pretty small and mobile. This helps develop that operational muscle to process dozens and dozens of tons of biomass per day. We're also purchasing waste bio-oil. There's a small quantity of this available in the United States, mostly from fertilizer operations and sawmills, and we're injecting that underground. And then we're also building our own pyrolyzers, which will be about 10 times the capacity of the existing prefabricated ones. So this is a picture of our setup in Kansas. This is about an hour east of Wichita. We process the corn stover, that's a nickname for corn stalks, that's on the right. They get baled up, chipped down on this first trailer skid, and then put into our pyrolyzer on the second one. Biochar comes out the middle, and bio-oil goes into the blue tank at the end. So with these, we're also working on Forestry Pilots. I know this is a West Coast themed webinar. And with the American West subject to tons of forest fires every year, we're really excited to be trying to implement solutions with a number of partners to help clean up the excess dead trees due to wildfires, and also prevent forest fires from even happening where it's healthy for that ecosystem by working with the folks that manage those forests. Today, most of those forest thinnings are just burned, and it has pretty negative effects on forestry air quality, and that happens. So we actually delivered about 90% of all of the permanent carbon removals in 2021 worldwide, with over 5,000 tons put underground on behalf of some excellent corporate customers and foundations. And we're super excited to continue that work going forward. We've got a lot of rigorous scientific validation and support from these leaders. Most of them have hired PhD academics to look at our process and make sure that it's truly additional, there's no leakage, and that we're really having a good impact on the environment around us. Along those lines, we actually are super transparent about what we put underground. So if you go to our website, charmindustrial.com/registry, you can see a full life cycle analysis and a prototype measurement, reporting, and verification protocol for every single one of our deliveries that we've started delivering on to date. So we're dedicated to kind of fixing a lot of the issues that exist in the voluntary carbon market, where it's not very transparent, and there's some pretty bad quality projects out there that aren't really having a carbon impact. We want to flip that on its head and just be super transparent about how we're taking carbon out of the atmosphere today. In terms of additionality is a word you'll hear a lot related to carbon offsets. I don't know if you saw the John Oliver piece on Last Week Tonight a couple weeks back. But the exciting part for us is that in the United States, as the largest producer of corn on earth, there's really no market to sell corn stover into. Corn stover is the leavings after the corn cobs are harvested. And those forest thinnings, again, are usually burned. So we're really confident that we're proactively pulling carbon out of the atmosphere via these plants that fix it in the first place. There's a huge amount of inedible excess biomass produced each year in the United States. So the Department of Energy estimates that there'll be about 1 billion tons available in 2040, and about 30% is due to the US Corn Belt. So there's a huge potential to have a big impact on climate change using this inedible biomass. Bio-oil, the stuff that we create, is really heavy. It tends to sink. And so we've run tests at the same temperatures and pressures of being way deep below the earth in these old oil wells to show that bio-oil tends to like bake into the spongy-like sedimentary rock that's at the bottom of 2,000 feet or more of oil piping, of old oil piping. And so that gives us a ton of confidence that putting it deep under the earth is a really good idea to do so. A lot of people ask, hey, why don't you use that bio-oil for fuels? And the first and foremost, just having the carbon come out of the atmosphere, go into plants, and then get emitted again doesn't actually accomplish removing it from the atmosphere. And secondly, it's not very efficient. The energy value of bio-oil, it has a bunch of weird stuff in it that you probably wouldn't want to put into a car engine. But it does have a very high tolerance for iron making. So iron is something that is made by burning mostly fossil fuels with the soft kind of red stuff. It's actually rust, is the same chemical component that you pull out of the ground to make this harder metallic iron. So when you burn a fossil fuel with that iron ore, you're left with CO2 and metallic iron. Our plan is to use that same iron ore, but instead react it with our bio-oil, which has a ton of carbon and hydrogen in it, and it performs the exact same transformation. It makes a metallic iron, and by reacting it instead of burning it, we're left with a very pure gaseous CO2 waste stream that we could team up with a point source capture company and put that back underground. So by doing so, we can make carbon negative steel. And again, this would swing the 8% of global emissions that come from steel to like negative 6% of carbon removed per year if we swung the world's steelmaking over to this process. So this is the journey that we're on. And like Ron mentioned, like we offer you the chance to join us. We're in this state right now where we're building the voluntary carbon removal market. And as soon as we hit $100 million in sales and deliveries, we'll be able to do a big cost unlock to get down to the regulated removals market. So if you work for a company that wants to demonstrate climate leadership, please get in touch. We'd love to help you do so by doing some bio-oil based carbon removals with you.